When the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor shocked the United States, the Pacific War exploded almost overnight. American forces were suddenly stretched thin across thousands of miles of ocean, facing an enemy that had planned its move for years. In the Philippines, the situation was dire from the start. American and Filipino troops were stationed across the islands, commanded by General Douglas MacArthur. On paper, the defenses looked strong. In reality, they were under-equipped, poorly supplied, and unprepared for the speed and coordination of the Japanese advance. Within days of Pearl Harbor, Japanese aircraft struck airfields across the Philippines, destroying much of the Allied air power on the ground. Control of the skies was lost almost immediately. With no air cover and limited naval support, the defense of the islands became a race against time. MacArthur knew he could not stop the invasion outright. Instead, he turned to an old contingency plan, War Plan Orange. The idea was simple and brutal. Delay the enemy as long as possible, then fall back to the Bataan Peninsula, a rugged, jungle-covered stretch of land west of Manila Bay. There, Allied forces would hold out until reinforcements arrived from the United States. Those reinforcements would never come. As Japanese troops landed in force, American and Filipino units fought delaying actions across Luzon. They blew bridges, ambushed columns, and traded ground for time. Every mile cost blood. Every day mattered. By January 1942, the defenders had withdrawn into Bataan. What awaited them was not a fortress, but a trap. Bataan was hot, humid, and infested with disease. Supplies had been rushed in during the retreat, but not nearly enough. Food was rationed brutally. Soldiers who had once eaten full meals were reduced to half-rations, then quarter-rations. Rice became precious. Meat disappeared. Malnutrition spread. Disease followed hunger. Malaria, dysentery, and dengue fever ripped through the ranks. Hospitals overflowed. Men fought while sick, feverish, and barely able to stand. Equipment wore out. Ammunition dwindled. Boots rotted in the jungle heat. Yet the line held. Japanese commanders expected Bataan to fall quickly. Instead, they ran into stubborn resistance from exhausted men who refused to collapse. Defensive positions were carved into hillsides and jungle clearings. Machine guns covered narrow trails. Artillery was dragged into impossible positions. Each Japanese assault was repelled at terrible cost to both sides. But time was running out. By February, the defenders of Bataan were shadows of themselves. Average weight loss among American soldiers reached alarming levels. Some men weighed barely more than they had at enlistment. Medical officers warned that units were nearing physical collapse. Still, they fought. The reason mattered. Every day Bataan held forced Japan to divert troops, ships, and aircraft that could have been used elsewhere. Every week gained allowed the United States to reorganize, mobilize industry, and prepare defenses across the Pacific. The stand at Bataan was buying time at a horrific price. In April 1942, the Japanese launched their final offensive. Artillery pounded the American-Filipino lines without pause. Exhausted defenders, many barely conscious from hunger and illness, tried to hold positions that no longer had depth or reserves. When breakthroughs came, there was no one left to counterattack. The line finally broke. On April 9, 1942, Major General Edward King made a decision no commander ever wants to make. With no food, no ammunition, and thousands of wounded who would die if fighting continued, he surrendered the forces on Bataan. It was the largest surrender in American military history. What followed was worse. Approximately 75,000 American and Filipino prisoners were forced to march north under brutal conditions, an event that would become known as the Bataan Death March. Beatings, executions, starvation, and disease killed thousands along the road. Survivors would carry the physical and psychological scars for the rest of their lives. For the American public, Bataan became a symbol of tragedy and endurance. For the military, it became a lesson written in blood about preparedness, logistics, and the cost of underestimating an enemy. But Bataan was not meaningless. The stand delayed Japan at a critical moment. It exposed the limits of Japanese logistics. It hardened American resolve. And it became a rallying cry that echoed throughout the war. Remember, Bataan was more than a slogan. It was a promise. A promise that those who had fought, starved, and suffered on that peninsula would not be forgotten, and that their sacrifice would be answered. Years later, when American forces returned to the Philippines, they did so with overwhelming strength. The ground lost in desperation was reclaimed with determination. Bataan did not end in victory, but it helped make victory possible. And sometimes, in war, that is the highest price a soldier can pay.